Hey Fight fans, I'm Sarah Davis and you're watching Fight News Now Extra. Coming up next in our Newsmakers, there's a change made to the Glory 3 card, a fight added to Tough 16, Chael Sonnen teams up with a fellow light heavyweight, and the pro wrestling world loses a friend. Our MMA panel will join us in just a moment, so let's get to the latest news. A last-minute change has been made to the Glory 3 card. Albert Kraus has come down with a bad case of the flu, forcing him to pull out of his bout with Sanny Dalbeck. Tournament alternative Yoshihiro Sato, who was to fight in a reserve fight earlier on the card, will now replace Kraus and fight the Swedish Dalbeck. For UFC fans, they're starting to get used to seeing last-minute changes to cards, and here's the latest. A battle between lightweights Jamie Varner and Melvin Guillard has been added to the Tough 16 finale on December 15th in Las Vegas. Both fighters rarely go the distance in their matches, so this fight should be explosive. Tough 17 gets underway soon, and head coach Chael Sonnen has just announced that he's brought Dan Henderson on as one of his assistant coaches for the show. Not only that, Henderson will also corner Sonnen when he makes his title shot against light heavyweight champion John Jones on April 27th. And some sad news from the pro wrestling world. Brad Armstrong has passed away at the age of 51. He was a well-respected talent from WCW in the 80s and 90s and one of Bullet Bob Armstrong's 4 sons. Brad saw a doctor for a medical issue last week and was found unresponsive yesterday morning. Our best wishes go out to his family and friends. Those are the latest headlines in combat sports. Now it's over to our panel of John Pollock and Robin Black. And John, how does Brad Armstrong's passing affect you?
Well, Brad Armstrong, he's not a wrestler that his name was a household one to its audience, but amongst the locker room, this was a guy that was incredibly well respected. I mean, he came up through Alabama, was part of a wrestling family, and he was a guy that was just a great technician in the ring. When WCW, for instance, wanted to bring in a big gimmick worker that really couldn't put those minutes together in the ring, Brad Armstrong was a guy they'd put him with, and someone that very, very much well respected amongst the wrestlers in the locker room. We transition now over to what is going to be coming up this weekend. And Robin, we've got World Series of Fighting, their very first card taking place 10:30 p.m. Eastern right here on Fight Network from Las Vegas, Nevada. A time buy down in the States on NBC Sports Network, formerly Versus. We've kind of talked about this in the weeks leading up of just where they can find a piece of the puzzle or a piece of the pie within MMA right now. And it's going to be very interesting this Saturday to see how they put together a production and moving forward into 2013.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's just so many moving parts to an MMA show. On paper, these fights are killer. I mean, as far as getting to watch top-level athletes outside of the UFC compete with each other, that's awesome. But looking at the television product, looking at the production, and looking at how you make this business profitable in a really complex landscape, those are the big question marks. But for fights, for big fights with big-name guys, this is a great card.
And you also have to look at the fact that, yes, they don't have a contract right now with NBC Sports. I could see a lot of promoters kind of jockeying right now, knowing that there is this looming Showtime debacle with Strikeforce, and Showtime might be in the market for a mixed martial arts organization, and a lot of promoters, such as World Series of Fighting, are going to want to vie for that open contract potentially.
Totally. NBC Sports, who used to be Versus, they like MMA. They did great with the WEC, and they're excited to do MMA. World Series of Fighting, they're just kind of testing the water. So they're going to be looking for MMA as well. Like you said, Showtime is going to be looking for MMA. So we've got the desire in television for the product. Unfortunately, the shortage, because of the UFC, is in quality matchmakers, in quality promoters, and quality business people. The UFC have them wrapped up, and if there's anyone outside of there, Bellator has them. There just aren't that many experienced guys, not to mention the shortage of fighters. So the business of it is a lot more complex. The fight card this weekend, awesome. The business, pretty murky, and we're going to see a lot of that kind of, it sort of works, it sort of does, it one and done kind of stuff for a little while.
And one of the interesting kind of subplots on that main card is Tyrone Spong, who's making the transition over to mixed martial arts, and kind of in the same vein that we saw Sugar Ray Sefo, who is behind this organization, doing so. He'll be taking on Travis Bartlett.
Yeah, and again, there's cool storylines in this. From a fighting perspective, Tyrone Spong is exciting because he's a stand-up fighter who knocks people out, and he's fighting a guy 7-2 who is also a stand-up fighter. So it's a nice-looking fight for him. You probably get a great big knockout. It also kind of makes sense when we are looking around. The UFC has 90% of the really good talent in the world. You got to look elsewhere. Where can you look? Top-level kickboxers. So, you know, it's interesting in that respect. I think you're going to see a big knockout when it comes to the fight, and everybody likes that.
As we talk about plot lines, let's transition over to Ultimate Fighter 17. Michael Landsberg, off the record, had Chael Sonnen on, and Chael confirming that Dan Henderson would be a part of his coaching staff. I think that adds quite an interesting layer to that reality show, throwing Henderson onto there as well, and making one of the other coaches really a part of the show as well, opposite John Jones.
Yeah, and this is interesting. I think Michael Landsberg's one of the best in the business outside of MMA media, and MMA media is kind of a loose term anyways, but Mike did a great job of getting that story. And Dan Henderson, I mean, Chael Sonnen has a lot of respect for Dan Henderson. And Chael Sonnen can look like the bad guy. He can shoot his mouth off all he wants. But he ended up looking like the humble guy who paid respect to his coach and said, hey, it's like the military. This guy's above me. That adds an interesting plot line. It tells us a little more about Chael Sonnen. I'm going to watch this season.
And not to mention that we all argue about the fact of Sonnen getting this spot, and it is to bring a lot of eyeballs to the show. You can almost kill two birds with one stone here, where Sonnen brings in an audience that maybe isn't as super familiar with Dan Henderson, and you have a future contender as well for the winner of that Jones-Sonnen fight. And if you don't think Jones and Henderson will fight, I think both men are businessmen.
Bang on.
And now we head over to a businesswoman in Sarah Davis. You'd fight John Jones, wouldn't you?
Hell no.
Mrs. Jones, maybe Mama Jones.
Maybe Mama Jones, but I would like to see the Henderson-Jones fight. So thanks for that, guys. And to keep up to date on all the latest combat news, check out our new iPhone app. So easy, you can scroll through all the headlines, latest news. It's all up to date, super easy. So just check out your iPhone app store. Now coming up next on Fight News Now Extra, we take a look at World Series of Fighting 1.